You're listening to an archived Cabral Concept podcast. After listening to this show, check out the most up-to-date podcasts available at stephencabral.com/podcasts or search directly on iTunes. And now, welcome to the Cabral Concept, where board-certified naturopath and integrative health practitioner Dr. Stephen Cabral shares how he was diagnosed at the age of 17 with a life-altering illness and given no hope for recovery. It was only after studying and traveling all over the world did he discover how to combine ancient Ayurvedic healing practices with state-of-the-art naturopathic and functional medicine to fully rebalance the body and re-energize it with life. It's time to discover how to get well, lose weight, and finally feel alive again. And now, here's your host, Dr. Stephen Cabral.
As we're getting ready, as we're approaching the new year, I really want to start to talk about how we should begin to change our mindsets to truly make 2017 our best year yet. And remember, the best way to accomplish your goals in 2017 or any year or any week or any month is really about going into it with a plan, going into it with the proper mindset, and that means developing it first. So it's kind of like creating a to-do list before you actually go through the items that you need to begin to check off. So today I want to bring up an important topic, not one that we've talked about yet on the Cabral Concept, but something that's really near and dear to myself. And the reason is that I started to look into this really about 7 years ago. I'll talk about my journey in just a moment, but this is a topic called minimalism. And a lot of people think that it's a vow of poverty or something like that. It's not that at all. And so what I want to talk about really, I'll get into all of what it means in just a moment, but really I feel the reason and the need to talk about this topic today is because it's too often really, it's the major thing that I see in life right now is where people are starting to lose track of really what's important in life. And again, I know that changes for each individual person. However, what we get caught up in a lot of time is all of these material things around us. And I'm not saying that they don't have a time and place and even a value, but what I want to talk about though, it's my hope that I can share something with you today that you don't have to wait for a tragedy or to really get into your 70s and 80s to finally appreciate, to finally understand what a lot of people do towards the end of their life of what's really important. And I want to chat about that today. I want to talk about that. I've read a bunch of books on this particular topic, and I've also been living it, like I said, for about the last 7 years. And again, it's different for every person. So I'm not going to tell you how you might want to incorporate minimalism into your life. I'm not going to give you a specific way. I'm going to start to talk about it and allow you to develop it in your own way, in your own life. And I know if you do that, you're actually going to be pleasantly surprised and you're going to be a lot less stressed. And I'll share that why as well. Okay, so what I've found and what I've seen really is once we start to get to our teenage years, we're caught up in either trying to be just like our friends, dress the same exact way. I remember like back when I was, 6th, 7th grade or so, like in grade school going, into my teenage years, it was always about like finding like, this is going to sound pretty funny, but like back in the day, I used to wear skids pants. I don't know if anybody remembers that. They were absolutely hilarious. They were basically like tapered pajamas that you would wear outside. And then I would wear like these Champion sweatshirts. Like I grew up in Medford, Massachusetts. That's how we did it. But, so it's like you're always trying to be, whatever's popular is what you're trying to wear. The same coat, the same jacket, whatever it is. Or you go in the direct opposite and then you're trying to be counterculture. But no matter what, you're just trying to figure your way out in life. And a lot of that you're doing just through material things because on the inside, you don't really know who you are. And then I usually see people in their 20s, they're just out of college and they're trying to find their way. Remember, it's always about trying to find your way. So they're not totally comfortable with themselves yet. So they're doing a lot of what their coworkers are doing, maybe a year or two above them, whatever it might be, trying to find the same type of car, drive the same type of car, start with their first home, whatever those things might be, dress the same way, whether it's this particular type of suit or what, again, it's always trying to just find your way and keep up. And then in the 30s, it's getting to be, well, we need to keep up with, as they say, the Joneses, and they have to have the same type of house and the same type of school for their kids and whatever all of those things are, again, that makes them feel validated in some way because, again, on the inside, it's kind of empty. It's not really knowing what's important truly to them. So if they don't know what's important to them, then they look outside of themselves for those things to, again, feel validated. And again, it goes on, and a lot of people catch this at different ages, but what I'm going to say is, before we know it, we've accumulated so many material things that we don't even know what to do with and we don't even need. And another big thing is that these material things also come along with their own type of stress. And the reason is we need to maintain them. We need to find houses for our things, storage units for our things. I mean, these things are left in storage for years at a time. We never even see them, but we feel the need to hold on to them. And a lot of times when we buy something, let's say like, I don't know, a new couch or a new whatever, we then have to get all the things that complement that as well, right? So everything just keeps accumulating just because of the same philosophy of purchasing more and more things. And again, I'm going to talk about in a moment that I'm not saying not to purchase things. What I'm going to do is try to flip it on its head and see, what do you really need to purchase? That's the big thing with me. And so the big question when we start this philosophy of minimalism is, do we need all of the things that we currently have in our life in terms of materialism to be happy? That's really the question, is when we purchase new things, does it really bring us additional value, or are we using them to basically kind of like pacify ourselves for the moment? It was a short-term thing that we looked for, maybe to bring us a little bit of happiness, but only for a few moments, and then it wore off, right? And so then we're on to the next thing, and the next thing, and the next thing, and it never seems to stop. Not only that, is the money seems to be leaving our account faster than it's necessarily coming in. But even a bigger topic than this that I really believe, and this is the reason that I mainly got into it, is that I found that the more things I had around me, the less bandwidth I had. Meaning, like I've talked about this quite a bit. The more clutter I have in my life, the more stressed I am. And that's because I have to keep track of all of these things essentially from a subconscious level. It's not at a conscious level, but all of these things around me, if it's a new monthly bill, if it's new whatever, I have to look at that and I say, okay, this has to be paid, this, and then all of these things start to add up. And it's like this low-level stress that starts to bubble up, and it leads to this outward appearance of anxiety or panic attacks or maybe even depression. So what I started to do is I said, these things don't seem to be vibing with the person that I know that I am and I'm trying to become. Because on the outside, sometimes I can appear outgoing, I can appear, high energy or any of these specific things. But in the inside, I try to remain calm. I try to remain level for the most part. It allows me to look at life a little bit more simply. I get to step back inside of myself. And when things are kind of chaotic on the outside, and they can be, right? And they always will be in everyone's life. And that goes for your work, family, relationships. It's never all perfect at the same time. At least it isn't for me, right? So we have to look at these things. We have to be able to step back, kind of calmly look back. So about 7 years ago, I started to look into minimalism. The first book I started with was called The Power of Less. And, it's one of those funny things. Like, I love to read, right? But I hardly ever know how these books come into my life. Of course, I know about the 300-400 books that I had to read for school, right? That's part of my degree. I had to read them. I had to study them for my board exams. But what about all the others? Like, how did those actually make it into my life? Sometimes they were referrals, but a lot of time, I went to a conference, I listened to someone speak, or I, maybe read one book and I found a topic within it and that led me to the next book. But, all of a sudden I was introduced to this concept of minimalism. And at that time in my life, I had just opened up my fitness studio, maybe 3 or 4 years before that. I had just finished with about 4 years of consulting in 5 different states. And I was pretty stressed. Everything was good in my life, right? Everything was good, but it was too much. And so I think that's how I found this book. And what I first started to do was I just stopped buying things for basically like 2 weeks, right? I said, I'm just not going to buy anything else. I'm going to purchase my food, and that's essentially it. And then I just started to step back. And what I did from there was I said, I'm never going to buy anything again. That's not what I did. But what I did was I took everything, like all my possessions out. I took all my clothes out of my closet. I took, all my shoes. I kept my books where they are, and I'll talk about those in a moment. I took out, papers and collections and all of these things, and I laid them out. Really, I laid them out on my bed, and I said, what do I really need? I don't want to become a pauper. I'm not saying that, but what do I really need? If I had worn something in a year or very few times and I didn't see myself actually going to wear it again, I'm just talking about clothes for the moment, or even like technology. I'll get to that as well. I donated those things. I looked at, I had iPods from years ago. I had all these things I was just holding on to in a drawer for no particular reason. It didn't. And I said, you know what? Someone else could use this. Someone might not be able to afford these particular clothes, or someone might not be able to afford an iPod or whatever it is. So I just gave them away to people, or I donated them. So that was my first step. And then after that, it got a lot easier because I had space. I had less clutter. And I just lived like that for a little while. And that was really enjoyable. And then I said, okay, right now, here's what I'm going to start doing. I whittled down to the smallest number of stuff I could literally live with. And again, it gets kind of smaller every year because you can't just make this huge jump. Sometimes it's like, it's too much, it's too overwhelming. So I just took a nice little baby step. And I really lived by Albert Einstein's quote where he said, everything should be as simple as possible, but not simpler, right? So sometimes when you read a lot about minimalism, again, there's a documentary out called Minimalism, like all of that is great, but sometimes you can take it to such a level that's unnecessary, meaning like, as Albert Einstein said, everything should be as simple as possible, but not simpler. Meaning like you can't just get rid of everything, especially if you have a family, right? You need some particular thing. So I'm not talking about that. I even know people who went down to like literally one bowl, a set of silverware, and that's how they lived. That worked for them. That doesn't work for me, right? Because I like to have people over and, you need a few things, right? So that's why I don't want you to believe that minimalism means taking a vow of poverty or feeling deprived in any way. And so one of the things I want to share with you is that I never got rid of all of the books I had. A lot of people do. But why didn't I get rid of, the 3,000 plus books that I have? It's because those particular things bring me great meaning. I look at them and I look at all of my great virtual mentors, as I call them, all these people that I learned from in the past. I look at my library and I see possibilities, meaning that I know that there isn't always an answer for everything that someone suffers from. I really, truly believe that. And that's because we have accumulated knowledge going back thousands of years. And that means thousands of years from like Ayurvedic-based teachings, traditional Chinese medicine teachings, all of these great Eastern-based practices and philosophies. And I see in these books possibility. I know that if for some reason I don't have the answer right now, and I don't have the answer to everything, that's for sure. What I do is I say, I know that there's a book out there, that there's something out there that's going to lead me to the answer that I seek, whether it's for myself or for someone else. So I look at this not as each individual book, but as an accumulation really of knowledge and kind of how far I've come, where it all started with books, right? Because I couldn't find a doctor out of all the great doctors in Boston that I went to from an allopathic perspective to help me get well. What I did was I started reading. I went to my local public library because I couldn't afford to buy books then. And I started to read all of their books on health. And then after that, I went to college too, and I read all the books on health in that particular library. And then I started to study more about medicine. And then I got introduced to some great, as they call them, alternative-based doctors, which, as I always say, there is no alternative to alternative medicine. So anyway, that's just how it came with my journey. So even though there's a lot of one particular thing, what I want to tell you is I don't want you to get rid of anything that has meaning to you. So I remember my grandmother, she used to have this, I don't remember exactly what you used to call it, but it was like this hutch or something like that. And it had a glass front and it had all these little like ceramic figurines in. And she had collected those from essentially like gifts from her grandkids and things like that over the years. And she had maybe like 100 of them. And those are like what I call knickknacks. And I would never do that. Like to me, that's out of the realm of possibility. But she loved them and that had value for her, right? So that's what matters. Like you can have things in your life and you can honestly have as much as you want in your life because I totally believe in abundance and prosperity. However, I don't believe in having things that only lead to having them for the sake of having them or to keep up with someone else or something else. That will always lead to more stress. And in the end, it really does lead to anxiety because it's just an accumulation of things that you're putting in your life to replace something else. And that's what I want to end with today is that really, when it comes right down to it, again, from a very young age, I had to experience some hardship and I will never ever complain about that in the future. And that's because it led me to discover so many of these different things. And so when I read books and when I've spoken with people, and especially on a lot of the internships, working with a lot of older people, again, like in their 70s and 80s, and listening, to what they had to say about how they looked back on their life and, what they really wish they did more of. Every single person, and again, I'll review this maybe in the future as well, but every single person talked about how it wasn't about the things that they had or necessarily even the trips that they took. It was about the people that they spent their time with. It was about those relationships. And they always said, I wish that I didn't work so much. I wish that I wasn't away so much. I wish I spent more time with my family. I wish I told my parents that I loved them sooner. I wish I told my kids how much they meant to me at a younger age. I wish I spent more time with my spouse. All of these particular things. And why are they talking about time, right? Why are they talking about time? Because time is something that you can't get back. You can pretty much always purchase something else, right? If it breaks or you lose it or whatever it is, even if it's an expensive thing, you could purchase it again. But you can never get back time. And that's the important thing to look at. If you're putting stuff in place of time, stuff in place of relationships, and stuff in time or in place of really spending quality moments or being in environments that enrich your life, you're missing out. And so that's really what I want to leave you with today. So as we look into 2017, what I want you to do is I want you to start to refocus, kind of recalibrate where you're at in life. I want you to pull out all of those things out of your closet, even those things that you might have gotten for Hanukkah or for Christmas. Do you need them? Like, we don't keep everything that we get. We have kind of like a one in, one out mentality in my household, even with my kids, and they're learning this from a young age. My children do not each need 40 different toys to play with, right? Like, they might like that, but they can't play with them all at once. So what we do is we take the ones and then they get to choose like which ones they enjoy and love the most. And then we work with a charity right here in Boston and actually in where my wellness center is in the same building. And we donate things to single mothers and their kids who may not have as much. And that's such a nice thing to do. So you don't have to look at it as kind of like taking your stuff away. You can look at it as giving it to someone else who could use it and get more benefit from it than you can right now. So I want to keep it at that for today. I want you to start to look at how you're going to shape, how are you going to rewrite your life in 2017, because really the possibilities are endless, and I know that you have so much more that you can achieve. Have a great day, everyone, and I look forward to speaking with you again tomorrow.
I want to sincerely thank you for your support of this podcast. I couldn't do it without you, and I mean that. I truly do. I also want to make sure you knew that we now have multiple ways for you to find your answers to the most difficult health, wellness, weight loss, and anti-aging questions. You can find podcast-specific topics like thyroid, adrenal, hormones, sleep, digestion, Ayurveda, and many more at stevencabral.com/podcasts that will then link you to your favorite Apple, Spotify, and other podcast players. Plus, all new podcasts and weekly exclusive video content is being added to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Stephen Cabral. And that's Stephen with a PH. Head on over and subscribe so that you don't miss any of the exclusive content. Lastly, if you've ever found any of my podcasts or books to be helpful, I would really appreciate it if you could leave a review on iTunes or your favorite media player for the podcast. Rating and subscribing to the YouTube and podcast allow me to reach more and more people and help spread my mission of healing throughout the world. Thank you again for being a part of this movement.